Today I wanted to talk about the idea of a life task. And the title of the video will be, You Are Your Life Task. And that's simple enough. It's something you see commonly enough, that your aim in life is you, that what you ought to be developing towards, focusing on, what you ought to be cultivating is yourself. And, recognizing the project is you, whoever you are. But there's something a little bit deeper here that I realized today that was really cool that I wanted to share. And so for me, the idea of a life task is something I got from Nietzsche. He wrote in his diaries or letters, one or the other, because I was reading this collection that I think his sister published. And he says, my life task is spread out before me, right? I don't know where the energies that I will need to complete this will come from, but I see it clearly. Right? It's sort of like seeing your fate spread out in front of you. You see where you're headed. You see what you were meant to do. And that's kind of what this idea is that you can see how your former experiences, your desolations, your ups and downs were part of your arrival at this location, to be able to see this view, right? You're climbing a mountain, it's stormy, it's high altitude, there's fog everywhere. You don't know where you're going. But suddenly, the horizon clears and you see something. And you say, wow, I don't know how I'll get there, but I know that's where I need to go. And so, what is someone's life task? What is your life task? I say you are the life task, but what does that mean? Okay, just go to the gym, take care of yourself, sleep enough, use your moisturizer, whatever it is. Is that it? Is it just taking care of yourself? Right? How does one discern? How does one discover? And so this is a conversation I had with my friend, and he's talking about, I'm being patient. I'm waiting for it to come my way. And if I share my own story, I discerned, I suppose, my life task last summer. And there's been ups and downs and deviations about pursuing it, because the thing about a life task is that it can be frightening. If you can see what it is that you are meant to do, perhaps, or some task you ought to complete, the enormity of it can be overwhelming. The enormity of it can cause fear. But this isn't a bad thing. I'll actually talk about that in another video, about how, fear, well, I'll get into another video, maybe right after this. But back to the life task. For me, I discovered it, I discerned it last summer, because I could see how all my past experiences had led to this moment. How they had all, been part and parcel of a journey that I had been unaware of, but that had prepared me with the insights, the knowledge, and most ultimately, a certain resolution that I needed to put into form. But here's the intersection. I discovered this life task. Simultaneously, I'm saying, well, the life task is you. Well, the reality is the life task, yes, is you. But the specific tasks are the reflection of your inner reality externally. You see, we're all dealing with some sort of tension in our lives, some sort of turmoil, some sort of tumultuous storm, right? Because when two energies come in opposing directions, they create a storm. And we all have that storm in us. Some of us have a pretty crazy storm. Some of us maybe have, not so bad of a storm. Some of us may have a storm, but we're not aware of it, But that storm can be painful and terrifying. It can be very painful and terrifying. You can feel like you're drowning in that storm. You're drowning under the water. Simultaneously, you can feel that you want to detach from all of it. You want to run away from all of that tension, so you distract yourself, and then suddenly you're away from it. But it's always there. And so there's a call. It kind of goes back to one of my former videos about the inner tension. There's a call within you. That storm, that tension, that opposing forces coming straight at each other, that's calling you to do something. And that thing is twofold. Firstly, it is the cultivation of yourself. It's the cultivation of your project, the project of you. Right? You are the life task. But simultaneously, it is the resolution of whatever that tension is. And I'll make a caveat, because not all tensions are equivalent. Some tensions are not necessarily real. They could be self-generated. In fact, I think many tensions are self-generated. But that actually doesn't really matter. You might say, what do you mean that doesn't matter? How could it be that the tension that I'm creating myself, and it's an illusion, how could that not matter? The fact that I'm creating illusion. Because a lot of life around us is already illusions. Illusion is just another word for art. Picasso said that art is a lie, which takes the place of truth. What else is a lie but an illusion that people believe? And so whatever your tension is that it's seeking resolution in some way, shape, or form. Maybe it's fabricated, maybe it's self-generated, maybe it's authored and engineered by something within you or something external to you. But still, it's seeking resolution. And as you resolve it, new tensions will take their place. And it's this dynamic between being and becoming. You find your being in the becoming. And you're able to move through these tensions. And you're never going to be fully rid of tension. As long as you live, you'll have that tension in your life. However, you may be able to recognize how to transmute it, transform it. And what does that look like? That looks like reflecting the inner reality externally. What I found in my life is that when I'm really in creative difficulty, right? When I have all these big ideas and I'm overwhelmed and I don't know what to do, the answer is always very simple. The answer is always very simple. Just do the thing you're afraid of doing. Follow that fear. Right? Your greatest fear is where you'll find your life task. Because your greatest fear is what is waiting to be transformed into the greatest faith. Right? And this kind of connects back to some of my earlier videos, right? It is the deepest desolation that leads to the highest affirmation. It's your greatest fear that leads to your highest self-love, your self-affirmation. So don't run from your fear, run into it. Because that fear is a storm, and when you run through the storm, you get to the eye. And the eye is not something, deviated or, away from the storm. It's the center of the storm, and that's where you are. You're at the center of the storm. And how do you get to the center? You got to brave those waters. You got to go up and down. You got to tear down your defenses and say, hey, I'm going in there. I'm going in there. And this is the most beautiful part. You are your life task. And as you rectify those resolve, unify your inner tensions, right? Between what you want or what reality ought to be and what it isn't, and the way that you transform yourself, you transform reality around you. You really do. Because like Picasso said, art is a lie that is treated as truth. You transform reality in the image of the art that is created as a consequence of the reflection of your inner reality externally. And so your art becomes part of the world around you. Your lie, your illusion becomes part of the world around you. But those are necessary lies and illusions. You might say, no, they can't be. Lies and illusions aren't right. But let's look at human history. Let's look at all the expanses of cultures in all these different areas. And which one of these cultures has stood the test of time? And where do these cultures even come from? If not from people. People who feel that tension and put it into form. And so, take a hold of that creative will inside of you. Your creative will itself is rooted in tension. It's an tension. Why? Because the will, if everything always went as you wanted it to go, you wouldn't have to will anything at all. Everything you'd be like in harmony. And when you're in harmony, you don't have to do anything. To even have a will that is free, begins with a denial of that will. Once it has been denied, once you say, the reality that I was seeking or the reality that I was living within has just been blockaded, like a river that was going down a path, now it must make its own direction. Now it must move around. Like a tree's roots, as they're growing downward and they hit an obstacle, they don't just stop, they try to move around. And so that's the same thing. It's in life, those are just necessities. And those tensions that we're living through, that's reality. Reality, you could say, is that opposing storm of energies. Self and other, man and God, particular and universal, life and death, day and night, shadow and light. Right? But we're caught up in that. We as humans, we navigate that tension, we unify it. We can make those things into one in our own lives. And in doing so, we transmute ourselves, and we're able to help other people. Because art uplifts. All right, well, everyone, thank you for listening, and I look forward to the next video.